Hi folks, welcome back to the Tabletop's Edge. In today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at the war aims or the overall goals of each of the 8 major powers in this upcoming playthrough, and give you a hopefully kind of at least a general framework of what each of them is going to be trying to do, and maybe give you a better chance of figuring out whether or not things are going well or not so well for them. Now, ultimately, victory in this Days of Decision WIF game is determined by the number of objectives that are held by the various ideologies. So the game ends in one of 2 ways. Either one of the 3 ideologies hits its target number for the number of objectives it needs to control, or one of the ideologies is all of the countries, all of the major powers within one ideology have been completely conquered. Now, there are 70 objective cities on the map, and I would have preferred to see perhaps more of a resource-driven victory condition than cities, because I think if you look back historically, Hitler wasn't invading Russia so much for the cities as he was for the oil and natural resources that were there. Same thing with Japan. They moved down into Southeast Asia and they bombed Pearl Harbor, not so much for the cities there, but again for those natural resources. So I would have preferred maybe to see victory conditions based on grabbing the resources of the world rather than the cities. But cities is what we have, so we will go with that. Now, there are a total of 70 of them on the Collector's Edition maps. In order for the Democrat ideology to win, they need to control 50 out of those 70. For the fascists, they need to control 45, and for the USSR and Communist China, they need to control 17. Ultimately, that's what's going to be driving the major powers in the course of the game, setting themselves up in the best position to try to grab as many of the objectives out there as possible to hit their number. But within that ultimate sort of victory condition that they're striving for, each of the major powers has some other more particular points that they're going to be focusing on. So with that said, let's go to the maps, and we'll just run through major power by major power and kind of give you an idea of where they are in 1936 and what they are looking to accomplish. We're going to start by taking a look at the fascist ideology. Those are the powers that are the kind of the primary drivers of action in the game early on for a number of reasons. You could also consider them the non-status quo powers, or the powers that really want to upset the current status quo. And much of the game is going to be about their attempt to do just that, while the democracies and the communists try to rein them in and stop them. And of the fascists, we're going to look at probably the biggest of the 3, and that's Germany first. Now, of the 70 objective cities, 8 of them are located on the Americas mini-maps, and it's going to be very difficult for the Axis to really project much power onto that part of the map. And I'm not optimistic about the Axis being able to control any of those 8. So in a way, the fascists are kind of writing off those 8 objectives right off the bat, which means there are 72 remaining, 33 of which are on the 2 European maps. Of course, that also includes Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. And there are 39 on the Pacific and Asian maps, which also includes portions of East Africa as well as Siberia and the Middle East. So the fascists do have a lot of work ahead of them if they are going to reach that magic number of 45. Germany is primarily concerned with repudiating the territorial adjustments of the Versailles Treaty. That means she is going to be redrawing a lot of borders in Europe. And indeed, for the fascists to win the game, that's exactly what's going to need to happen. Now, specifically, she wants to bring Austria and the Sudetenland back into the German home country. Would not mind seeing Czechoslovakia actually cease to exist entirely. She'd also like to turn the Baltic Sea up here into a German lake through economic and political arrangements in Scandinavia. Sweden has a very large military for a minor country. The main problem with Norway, Sweden, and Finland, where we find 3 objective cities, is that they are across the water, and Germany's weakness throughout the game is her naval arm. She's got a very powerful army, very powerful air force, but her navy, even though individual units are pretty high quality, there simply are nowhere near enough of them to seriously challenge the Commonwealth and the United States. So the best she can hope to do, really, navally speaking, is to try to secure the Baltic Sea by bringing Scandinavia basically onto her side, primarily through diplomatic, political, and economic means, since it's going to be difficult for her to project her land and air power into Scandinavia, and then to be able to secure Scandinavia against counterattacks from the sea that the Commonwealth and the other democracies will be able to mount eventually. So beyond turning the Baltic up here into her own little lake, she's also looking to economically dominate Central and Eastern Europe. So that would be Poland, Hungary, Romania. Romania is just to the east here, has the single greatest amount of oil outside of Russia in Europe. So again, Germany is looking to really not necessarily conquer all of these countries, but get as many of them into an alliances and hopefully even aligned with her as she can. All of that basically is to serve to expand the economy, to provide the industrial base for the final confrontation with Bolshevism, where living space for the German people will be secured in the East. European Russia has 5 or 6 objectives on map in it, and it's got a number of resources, including some much needed oil. So Germany is basically resigned to the fact that she will be fighting the Soviet Union at some point in the future. And the other moves that she will be making, both politically and militarily, are all designed to put her in the strongest position vis-a-vis the Soviets as possible, so that she can basically kick them out of Europe and maybe even start penetrating into Siberia. Now let's take a look and see what the Italians are going to be shooting for. We turn now to Italy, who is very clearly the junior partner in the European fascist ideology. Italy suffers from a number of disadvantages, including poor resources and production capabilities. Her army land forces are generally pretty awful. They're low both in terms of quality and quantity. However, her navy is actually quite good. A lot of the units are very good and can stand against any of the major naval powers' forces. Their biggest handicaps are the fact that it's very short-ranged, and that there simply aren't nearly enough of them to deal with the French Navy and the Commonwealth Navy, not to mention adding in the United States Navy. However, the Italian Navy is very capable of dominating the Mediterranean, and that's exactly what the Italians are going to set out to do. In fact, they're going to be looking to reconstitute the ancient Roman Empire. And they're going to be turning the Mediterranean here into an Italian lake. They are looking to expand Italian control to the Iberian Peninsula. They would love to grab the north coast here of Africa, as well as Greece and Yugoslavia, and perhaps even Turkey and the Levant over here. At a minimum, they're looking to close the Suez as well as grabbing Gibraltar at the other end. By sealing both of the entrances to the Mediterranean, they're going to make it that much more difficult for the Western allies to reach the Italian home country. In addition to reconstituting the empire and turning the Mediterranean into an Axis lake, they also want to neuter the Commonwealth and French influence in Africa and the Middle East. Now, a lot of these are going to go hand in hand. If Italy is able to grab all of North Africa here and the burgeoning Italian East Africa portion of the empire, they will go a long way towards kicking the French and Commonwealth out of Africa and the Middle East, securing some much needed resources such as the oil here in Iraq and Saudi Arabia and maybe even Persia if they get lucky. So that's going to be what's driving the Italian effort throughout the game, and they will be coordinating very closely with Germany. So there will be some discussions as to where their spheres of influence end up falling. Is Yugoslavia going to fall into Italy's or Germany's? Is Austria going to fall into Italy's sphere of influence or Germany's sphere of influence? These are the things that we're going to see play out hopefully here over the coming turns. Now, let's go ahead and turn to the Japanese and the Far East. Now, for Japan, her driving concern is going to be securing the raw materials needed to expand her industrial base, which will give her the military she needs to be able to go out and grab the objective cities that are scattered all over both of the Pacific and Asian maps. She's looking to remove the Western imperialists from Asia, which means doing something here about the French in Indochina and the Dutch in the Netherlands, East Indies, even the Commonwealth here in Malaya, Burma, and perhaps even India, as well as the United States in the Philippines. And in the course of removing the Western imperialists, she will then be able to secure most of the resources in the area, which will again serve her primary focus of building up her economic base to field a military powerful enough to reach that total of 45 objective cities for victory. Japan's also looking to eliminate China as a potential Asian rival. China has a number of resources, as you can see. They are weak and divided. Their military is not very good, and Japan sees an opportunity there to grab a lot of the resources she will need over the course of the game. And then finally, she's looking to discourage Soviet expansion in Asia. It's bad enough that the Soviets are where they are, but we want to make sure that they stay in the current Soviet Union and we don't see them encroaching into Manchukuo or Korea or even into China for that matter, should China fall into a civil war. That is going to keep the Japanese busy, I think, for quite some time. They are going to be outnumbered just as the European fascists are, except at least the European fascists have a partner they can lean on when necessary. For Japan, she's going to have to carry the whole load against the United States, Commonwealth, China, France, and the Soviet Union. So it's a tall order ahead for her. Obviously, given the amount of sea area out here and the fact that Japan herself is an island nation, and that means all of the resources she's going to need are going to have to come over the sea. She's going to focus on building up the strongest navy possible, and she's helped in that regard by having a very large force pool of some very, very capable ships, enough to stand toe-to-toe with any single major power navy, including the United States, at least prior to, say, 1943, late 43, 44, before she's really sort of outclassed by the United States Navy. But if her European partners are doing their job, the United States will hopefully be distracted enough that they won't be able to dump as much of their resources into building up their navy, giving the Japanese an even better chance for a big run here in the Pacific. Now, with the fascists out of the way, let's turn next to take a look at the communists' major powers. Now, there is only one communist major power, and that is the USSR. You can also probably throw the Chinese communists in there as well, but they are just, at least initially here, the tiniest fraction of a power. I don't think they quite fit the bill as a major power. And they're run sort of as an adjunct to the USSR. So we're just going to primarily focus on the USSR. They need 17 objectives to win the game, and they actually start with control of, I believe, 6 of them, which means they need to come up with another 11 objectives. There are several here in Eastern Europe as well as Scandinavia up there. And the Soviets know that eventually they are going to be facing Germany and Italy and, well, hopefully not the Japanese as well, but potentially all 3 fascist powers at some point. And so to give them the best chance of victory, they're going to be looking to create a territorial buffer zone here in Eastern Europe, either by politically aligning countries like Romania, Bulgaria, Poland, and Hungary, or just outright militarily conquering them. She's also looking to increase her industrial base to support the expansion of revolution worldwide. She wants to eliminate the fascist threat, which is something she's not going to be able to accomplish on her own. So she may need to sort of make nice with the democracies in order to get the required help she needs from them. On the other hand, the USSR would also like to encourage the Democrat and fascists to fight each other in order to weaken both of them. So if the fascists and Democrats can get tied up fighting each other and they're not paying attention to the USSR, that may open some opportunities for the Russians to sort of slip in and grab the objective cities they need. She also would like to exploit Chinese internal divisions to create a communist China, because again, Chi-Com objectives that are controlled by the Chi-Coms are going to count towards the communist total. So, and China does contain, I think, at least 3 objectives. So that would go quite a ways towards boosting communist chances for victory if a Chinese civil war breaks out and the Chinese communists under Mao can prevail. And then finally, she's also looking to gain a warm weather port on either the Mediterranean or the Red Sea. And that means potentially clashing with Turkey here, or if we go to the Middle East, Iran sits right on the Soviet Union's southern border. There are some more oil resources. We've got a large port here, Kuwait, which currently is controlled by the Commonwealth, so that may put them into some conflict there. And in Scandinavia, the Soviet Union would again like to spread their influence over Scandinavia here, which will give them naval outlets here a little bit further west, so that would help her project some power against the democratic forces, particularly the Commonwealth. So that's the Soviet aims, at least as of 1936. We'll see how things develop as the game progresses. Now let's take a look at the 4 democracies. We're going to start with the weakest of the democratic powers, and that's China. China really has just a couple of fairly simple aims. First is to contain and eventually eliminate the Chinese communists, uniting China internally. And the other thing that China is going to be attempting to do is to resist Japanese expansion in Asia. China knows the Japanese want to continue to expand. She also knows she's got lots of resources that are within relatively easy reach of the Japanese. So holding the Japanese at bay and eliminating the Chinese communists are going to be what's driving China. She's not really in a position to do much more than that, and even to accomplish those aims, she's going to need quite a bit of assistance from the other democracies like the United States and the Commonwealth. Next, let's go ahead and take a look at what's going to be driving the French. Well, in a nutshell, the French aims are to maintain the status quo, which is going to put her into direct conflict with Germany. So she will need to prepare for that conflict with Germany that's coming in the future, and that's going to require the assistance of the Commonwealth. Uh, Beyond the Commonwealth, France is also going to be looking to keep Germany hemmed in through a strong alliance with Central European states, countries like Czechoslovakia, Poland, Romania, maybe even Austria or Yugoslavia. Historically, this could be the equivalent of the Little Entente. So with the Central European countries here, none of them are nearly as strong a partner as the Commonwealth could be, and none of them are particularly strong even in relation to Germany. However, if France can build a network of countries here, then the total aggregate force that these smaller nations can apply against Germany may help to offset whatever imbalance in forces may exist between France herself and Germany, or at least buy France the time she needs to build up to the point where she can take the war to Germany. And then finally, France's other rival is Italy, and this is usually in respect to the Mediterranean. So the French definitely want to curb any Italian expansion in the Med. That may mean France becoming close to Spain as forming some kind of a defensive alliance, but again maintaining a strong naval presence in the Med to offset the Italian Navy, because without a navy, Italy's dreams of Mediterranean expansion are pretty much going to be stillborn. That's going to bring us to the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. Now, the Commonwealth primarily wants to maintain the status quo. I don't know if you can detect a theme starting to form here among the democracies. But maintaining the status quo means that the Commonwealth is going to look to form a close alliance with France to use them as a continental shield against Germany. The Commonwealth has far more commitments worldwide than France does. And a lot of her economic resources are potentially vulnerable to Japanese expansion in Asia. So the Commonwealth cannot afford to commit as large a percentage of her resources to a continental fight in Western Europe as France can. So she's going to want to buddy up with France and use France's land mass to primarily shield Western Europe from any German aggression. She also, in Europe, wants to keep the USSR out of Scandinavia. Now, whether she can do this politically or if it comes to military blows, she may find herself at war with the Soviet Union, although that's a situation she would like to avoid if possible, because ultimately Germany is the bigger threat, I think, than the Soviet Union for the Commonwealth. So she doesn't want to take her eye off the ball, but she also can't afford to allow communist expansion into Scandinavia, not only in terms of just outright victory for the game, but because of the position that would enable the Soviets then to have as far as projecting power even further westward. Now, to meet some of these goals, she's going to attempt to maintain a strong navy to secure the empire. As I said, she's got commitments worldwide. She will need to be able to shift what land and air forces she has around the world quickly in some cases, and she's also going to need a navy strong enough to contain the Italian Navy, as well as face the Japanese Navy, and contain whatever naval forces the Germans may build, while simultaneously protecting her very long and extensive convoy pipeline. So it's a tall order for the Commonwealth in that respect. She does have the largest navy of any of the major powers at the start of the game, but that is offset by the by the number of commitments that she has to contend with those forces available. So she is never really quite as strong as she would like to be in any one spot because she is spread so thin. As a result of that, if she can reduce some of those commitments, that will allow her to build up some strength in some critical areas, for instance, the Mediterranean. To that end, if she can discourage some Japanese adventurism in Asia, that may allow her to withdraw some of her naval assets as well as land and air assets from the Pacific and bring them back to Europe and Africa as needed to counteract any Italian and German aggression. And then finally, she's looking to build a strong relationship with the USA. The United States is the single most powerful major power in the game eventually, but it's going to take years for the United States to realize that potential. And in the meantime, the Commonwealth is going to have to rely on primarily France and maybe some other minor countries to help hold the line against the fascists until the United States can be drawn into the bigger conflict, at which point the Commonwealth and the United States should be able to team up and defeat both the Japanese in the Pacific and Germany and the Italians in Europe. And speaking of the United States, that's going to bring us to our last major power. Now, as I just said, the United States has potentially the strongest military of any single major power in the game. However, as far as the United States is concerned, they really want to avoid entanglement in any foreign wars. That's not going to be that realistic of a goal in this particular game because we all know how this is going to play out. And if the United States sits on the sidelines throughout the course of the game, then the fascists have an excellent chance of achieving their victory condition. So at some point we know the United States is going to be drawn into a larger conflict, but they would prefer to put that off as long as practical. What they are focused on is keeping other major powers out of the Western Hemisphere, off of the Americas map here. They don't want anybody grabbing anything here in Central and South America in their own backyard. They would also like to maintain the open door policy in China and support China against any other aggressors in the region, namely the Japanese. And in order to do that, the United States is going to focus on building up their Navy. They will have eventually the strongest single Navy in the game, capable of taking on any other major powers, naval forces, and probably 2 or even 3 other major power navies in combination. So expect early on in the game for the United States to focus heavily on naval building and naval commitments, and we'll see how successful some of the other democracies are at drawing her into the conflict in a more active role as things start to heat up. And with that, I think we are ready to finally begin this playthrough with our next episode. We're going to kick off in the January-February 1936 turn. This will give you an opportunity to see how Days of Decision works and how it integrates into a regular World in Flames game. We're going to try to see just how deep into this game we can get. This is a massive undertaking, as you might imagine. Just even a standalone World in Flames campaign game is a massive endeavor. So hopefully we will get far enough into this game, if not to see one side actually meet their victory conditions, to at least give you a really good look at how this system works and just what give you an idea of what the possibilities are in it. That's going to do it for today. Thanks so much for watching. Take care, and we'll see you next time.